And so my journey out of the probation service into 20 years in the evangelical leadership of the United Kingdom got me increasingly to understand that there were dimensions to God which were far bigger than I had been led to believe, that the family of God was far bigger than I had been led to believe, and the mission of God was far bigger than I was led to believe. Funny thing about that, of course, is that the wider you go, the bigger God gets, the more vulnerable you get. The bigger God gets, the smaller you become. The bigger the church gets, the more you perceive your own responsibility and your own role within the church, within a particular framework. And the sense of proportionality between who you are as a Pentecostal, Baptist, Catholic, Anglican, or whatever, is measured now against the size of the body. And the bigger the mission becomes, the bigger the family has to be, because you know that no one section of the family can deal with the entirety of the mission. It was a very defining moment for me on one occasion when I was part of an ecumenical group who commissioned a report for the health of London. I think that's what it was called, somewhere back in the mid-90s. And the late 90s. And at that point, Cardinal Basil Hume, the leader of the Roman Catholic Church in the UK, I remember, was part of our ecumenical meeting. Having commissioned this report, we came to the press launch of this wonderful document, which we felt had a lot to offer the capital, London. And it was interesting because I was a co-signature along with all the other Christian leaders from this ecumenical gathering. But I remember when it came to the photo shoot, we all lined up, we were required to line up for the snap. And I thought to myself, I am an evangelical Christian. I am the leader of the Evangelical Alliance of the United Kingdom. If I'm seen in the same photo shoot as the Cardinal, I'm dead meat. I thought, what could I possibly do? I've got to keep my credentials intact. And I remember making some incredible, pathetic excuse about having to go back to the office to do something or other. And I was on the top of a number 3 bus going back to Kennington. And I remember thinking, what kind of an evangelicalism is this? What kind of a Christian faith is this? That you cannot be seen to be flanking men and women of other expressions of Christian faith for the common good. How can you not stand with a very godly man? If you ever knew Cardinal Hume, you always felt as if you stood next to him. You always felt as if you might just be waking him from prayer or something, disturbing his prayer rather. You always just felt that kind of godly sense of him. And I thought, how can you distance yourself from a person like this? In the interest of the common good, you have to recognize that you are a part of a big family, a family with whom you have 1 or 2 historic conversations nonetheless. And we can keep conversations going for the better part of 400 or 500 years, can't we? We're good theologians and church leaders. But nonetheless, you are a part of a bigger family. Now, I'm saying all of that because the reason which brings us to this place this afternoon, I think, requires, first of all, a big God. If we don't have a sense of a big God, then we're always constrained in our ability to meet the big issues. And if we don't have a sense of a big family, we're always curtailed in our ability to understand this big God and his methodology and his networking potential to respond to the big mission. And it is in the context of the big mission that I'm so glad that in the past 30 years, accelerating the last 15, Christians have become so committed to the mission of God. And that mission of God has always been a bias to the poor, as David Shepherd wrote many years ago. That mission of God has always been a bias to those who are vulnerable. That mission to the poor has always been a particular concern for those who are oppressed. And one of the great calling cards of the church has always been its commitment to the oppressed, to those who have been marginalised. Our Catholic brothers and sisters have been far more consistent and persistent in following that vision and being close to the heart of God in relation to the poor and the marginalised. I think other parts of the Christian community, in particular the evangelical world, have caught up with that vision, perhaps over the last 30 years. The statement which came out of the Lausanne report in the mid-70s helped us to begin to reorientate ourselves as the body of Jesus Christ in relation to the poor. And everything from tactical responses to poverty to policy responses to policy has therefore come out of our realignment with God's mission for the poor. I'm very pleased that by the time we reach the late 80s, 90s, mid-90s, the Christian church globally has begun a reawakening in terms of the breadth of our kingdom mission. My first introduction to this was being caught up in the mission called Jubilee 2000. I remember being a part of NGOs sat in a room with Gordon Brown and Claire Short on a quarterly basis to talk about Jubilee 2000 campaign, the campaign to alleviate the debt of 43 highly indebted countries. Drop the debt. Jubilee was a theological call. Few people, even within civil society, understood that. Anne Pettifor, who led Jubilee 2000, understood that Jubilee was a theological imperative for the poor. The then treasurer of the United Kingdom, Gordon Brown, understood that this was a theological imperative with policy implications on behalf of the poor. And when some of us reached the back end of the year 2000 and recognized that the realpolitik meant that it was unlikely that within 24 hours we would see the cancellation of unpaid debts by poor countries, we then began to ask the question, if Christians have been so embroiled in lobbying and agitating for the poor in Jubilee 2000, what is it that God might be calling us to do in relation to the poor? What do we do with this energy? What do we do with this reawakening